when you're at the top of your physical peak and your condition, you really feel it, and you can feel a difference from other races. And we got through that semi-final, and we kind of both said to each other how excited we were to get going, because we didn't need to dig into our energy reserves to win, and we won that semi-final by quite a lot.
What does it feel like to win a gold medal? What does it take to win a gold medal? Our guest knows just that. What's up, everyone? This is the Whoop Podcast. I'm your host, Will Ahmed, founder and CEO of Whoop. Our guest today, Fintan McCarthy, two-time gold medalist in the lightweight division for rowing. He's got an amazing journey, young 27-year-old who's accomplished enormous things. We go into his Whoop data. We talk about training and recovery, breathing techniques, how to perform under the most pressure, and a whole lot more. That is the Whoop Podcast right now. Okay, Fintan, welcome to the Whoop Podcast.
Thanks for having me. No, it's cool to be here.
Stoked to have you. We've got 2 gold medals on the desk here, so that's always a good start.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely get to the Olympic golds, but I guess I wanted to start with just how did you first get into rowing?
I guess it wasn't like a natural thing for me. I guess as a kid, I had a twin brother growing up. Well, I still do have a twin brother, but yeah. You know, that competitive sort of aspect between siblings is there, and then once you're twins, it's just dialed all the way up. So I guess throughout our early years, I probably went down the more academic route, while he was quite sporty, especially in Ireland. The kind of traditional Gaelic football and hurling side of things is pretty popular. So he was very involved in like soccer and Gaelic football, and I guess I tried for a bit, but you know, when your twins better than you at something, you kind of tend to let them have it and find your own thing. So that's kind of eventually what started happening to me. I just wasn't involved in many sports, and I think when came to about 14 or 15, I decided like I need something physical. Obviously, at the time, I wasn't thinking about it this way, but it really kind of gave me another community and another a family, I guess, and I saw something there for me. And the rowing is kind of one of those sports where it's very honest. Like whatever you put in, you usually get out from it, and you can kind of see the correlation between working hard and achieving results. So I think that kind of drew me in really early, and just the people around me as well that were really encouraging. You know, I had some really good coaches. Our coach actually, who coaches us now, who's coached me for the last 2 Olympics, he's been my coach since I started, really, since I was about 15 or 16. So yeah.
I've been around rowers my whole life. I went to a boarding school called St. Paul's, which had a very good
Oh yeah.
rowing
Yeah.
program, and I went to Harvard, which had a good rowing program. And I would say the common characteristic amongst good rowers that I knew was this like very high pain threshold. Like
Yeah.
like rowing was as much about rowing as it was about struggling,
Mhm.
and it was like, how good are you at struggling?
Yeah.
And
It's big.
and I'm curious if that was something that you realized early on in getting good at it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you need to be able to sit in that pain cave and just ride it out. But because racing is so hard, it's nearly kind of embedded in the culture that, you know, rowing training's hard and you gotta push yourself every day. But you know, sometimes it's not always the best thing to do, and you need to like dial it back and look at where you can afford to maybe take things a bit easier, and just get in that zone two kind of stuff, and sit there and work there, which is still hard. You know, it's difficult to sit on a rowing machine for like 2 hours twice a day.
I remember, like, having breakfast with friends the days that they had to do the 2K test
Yeah.
on the erg,
Yeah.
which
Nasty.
why don't you describe what the 2K test is for people who are less familiar
Yeah.
with rowing?
So it's basically the gold standard measure of rowing. Like all our races, you know, the Olympics, the World Championships, they're all over 2K. Obviously, when you're on the water, there's sort of like a technical aspect of it. But when we're in the gym on the rowing machine, usually the C2, it's kind of the classic instrument of torture, I guess. So that's, yeah, it's basically the standard measure of how physiologically good you are at rowing.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2,000 and then as fast as you can do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And,
it's pretty simple.
depending on your level, that's like a 6 minute or 7 minute, just
Mm,
absolute
yeah, pain.
pain.
You you get to a stage where obviously you have to pace it, it's 6 minutes long. You can't be at your absolute max from start to finish, but it's because it's so in between, like, something long and something really short, it's pretty much you're riding that red line between just going too hard and holding back. So sometimes it can go, like, horribly wrong because you misjudge it slightly and
Mm.
you get maybe 16 or 1,700 meters in and you're finished. So it is really about dialing in and kinda knowing what you're capable of.
I mean, obviously, there's like a certain training cadence to rowing, which is gonna make you better. I'm
Mm,
I'm interested on the mental side.
yeah.
Like, what have you found effective when you're in that period of your body wants to stop, your mind wants to
Mm,
stop, and you push through that?
yeah. Well, I usually kinda try and take myself out of it. I know you obviously have to be present, and in a race is what usually when you're hurting the most. Training, you might hit that level, in the last interval of a tough session, but it's kind of easy to manage that because you might be in there for like 30 or 40 seconds. For me, focusing on the process of racing is really important just to distract. I'm pretty much just looking for distractions the whole time. What I usually do is break the race down into maybe quarters, and then in each quarter I'll say, okay, well, this is going to take me probably 60 strokes. So I'll count like 20, then I'll count 10 twice, then I'll count 5 twice, and the 10 and 20, and then on to the next one.
So you're trying to break it into almost like the smallest intervals you can,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's always easier to say, "Okay, 1 more,"
Mm,
than it is
mm,
to say you've got, 600 more or
yeah.
something,
And
right?
sometimes I'll like surprise myself during it and say, okay, well, we're gonna count to 50 this time, and just keep it fresh that way. But yeah, just focusing on the task at hand, and not how long you've left to go, but the next stroke and the next breath or something like that is usually my way of coping.
How does breathing fit into this? Have you found that there's certain breathing techniques that have helped?
Yeah, definitely during you kind of have to breathe a certain way because the way it works is when you slide up, this rowing seat is on rails, right? So you
Yeah,
have to.
it moves.
Yeah. So it's sort of a full body thing. But when you're at the catch, which is at the front position of the stroke, you're quite compressed. So your thighs they're kind of up against your chest. So you need to work the breathing in a way that you're taking a breath just as you begin the stroke. Because if you arrive up at the catch and your lungs are full of air, you don't have that braced.
Affects your
Yeah,
form
yeah,
probably too.
you need to be braced to take
Yeah,
the load at the catch, which is where it's heaviest.
fascinating.
Yeah. I guess in racing for me, it's usually like 2 breaths a stroke, but it just becomes second nature, you don't
So
really.
2 breaths a stroke, so do that. What would that look like for
Okay, let me think about it. When I'm doing the motion, I'll get up to the catch and then I'll breathe out quickly like that.
so you do 2
Yeah,
inhales. Interesting.
quick ones. Yeah, yeah,
Like that.
yeah. And at the end of a race, obviously it gets pretty tough because your breathing's going up and you're just sucking in air. Like your throat will be
Yeah,
pretty
wow.
raw just because you have to do it that quickly. I know some guys do like one of the yeah, huge during the drive, I guess. I remember watching, I think it's Mahe Drysdale, he's a Kiwi sculler. He's won many world championships and Olympic medals. Sort of when I started rowing, I think he was a big 1 breath per stroke guy, but,
Huh.
I think I quickly learned that wasn't for me. My lungs aren't probably as big as his, so
I mean, it's interesting. It feels like it's independent from how big your
yeah.
lungs are because if you inhale twice, you're probably pulling in more air.
Yeah, that's true. It depends on, I guess, your rhythm as well because the stroke rate is higher or lower depending on, how you've trained, how you've set up the boat. There's just so many variables and things that you need to get individually right for yourself.
So when you erg, do you do the 2 breaths?
Yeah.
Okay, so you always do that.
Yeah, always. But when you're doing maybe an easier session or a longer kind of zone 2 work or maybe some threshold stuff, the cadence is going to be different. So it might be deeper breaths, shallower breaths. But it's funny talking about it because it's not something you get on and think, I'm going to take 2 breaths for stroke and do it here and here. It's just built in now.
Yeah, it's part of
Yeah,
your form.
yeah.
It's just interesting to me though that the way you breathe is part of your form. Because if you compare that to most sports, like, the way a basketball player breathes isn't actually affecting or
Mm,
isn't a way that he or she's thinking about their,
yeah,
free throw shots or whatever.
yeah, yeah. And it's like I said, we're not thinking about it too much, but it definitely does affect how you move during the stroke, and it's going to affect your technique and affect your
I've found that
rhythm.
that athletes in, what you might call more free form sports, like the very best ones do actually find a way to breathe under certain
Mm.
situations. I was recently with Virgil van Dijk and with Cristiano Ronaldo, who are 2, like, footballing stars,
Yeah, I
and
know.
they have techniques they do right before, like, a big kick or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But in general, I think that breathing is probably an underrated component to all sports and probably all activities, if you will.
Mhm.
It's just that it's explored less.
Yeah, and, like, those things, they center you as well.
Oh, totally, it gets
Yeah,
your whole mind, body moving in the same
yeah,
direction.
yeah, and just prepares you for the task at hand, like I was saying earlier, the process of doing a race and all that stuff. You do need to be present, and I find thinking about it can really bring you into the moment and get you ready.
Yeah, I don't know if you're a golf fan, but Tiger Woods, I noticed, would do this, and I don't even know if he practiced doing it, but everything would get really slow when he had to do something, like, huge. Like, when he
Okay.
was under the most pressure, if you go back and watch, like, when he chipped in on the 16th hole at the Masters or made, like, this really long putt on the 17th hole at, Players Invitational, like, everything gets super slow and his breathing gets really, really slow. And it's funny because no one really talks about it, but it's something that I've noticed that the really top athletes have found ways to do.
Mhm.
Okay, so you just won a gold medal. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Walk us through a little bit, like, sort of the buildup of the Olympics and ultimately getting to win that event.
Yeah, it's been obviously a shorter cycle this year. The last Olympics ended up happening in 21, so we didn't really have the usual 4-year gap. So I feel like for me anyway, I was pretty back into training a month or so after the Tokyo Games, with the goal of Paris being the last Olympics for our weight class. So in rowing, there's a lightweight weight class and a open weight class. So we have to weigh 70 kilos before 2 hours before every race. They're actually getting rid of that class now after Paris. So we knew that this was going to be the final Olympic Games for this weight class.
What is that in pounds? 154. Okay. And what is your normal, like, walking weight, if you weren't trying to be under a certain
Yeah,
number?
I would say I'm not sure in pounds, but
In kilos.
yeah, maybe 76, 77.
So that's probably like 15 pounds more. So you're normally like 167
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and you cut to 154
yeah,
2 hours before every
yeah,
race.
yeah.
I mean, that adds like a whole 'nother dynamic to this competition.
Yeah, it's a different sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially because the weigh-in is 2 hours before, it's not like you can go to extreme, like, dehydration,
Yeah.
measures.
What wrestlers do and
Yeah,
fighters
yeah,
do, they'll do all these dehydration stuff,
yeah.
and then the day of the fight, they weigh 20 pounds
Yeah,
more.
yeah, because their weigh-in's really early, right?
Yeah,
But,
their weigh-in's like 24 hours before the fight.
yeah, yeah, so for us, like, we still do use some of those techniques, but we just need to be really careful because it is so close to the race.
And how often were the races in Paris?
Every second day.
So
Yeah.
every second day. So what was your routine for training and eating?
When you're coming into a regatta, obviously, you're kinda tapering, so there's not, we don't have the usual 5 or 6 hours of training a day to do, so you can get away with a bit less food. the way you have to manage it is it's totally different to a training day, because you're trying to fuel around the training and also eat foods that are gonna not sit in your stomach. So, the less fiber, the better, really. So it's
Yeah.
all a lot of kind of plain rice and that kind of stuff, just to get the carbs in.
Plain rice. What else?
Yeah, Powerades. Yeah,
Powerades.
I love a frozen Powerade before the race, get the core temp down. The window of 2 hours, it's a funny one, because not only do you have to rehydrate whatever you've lost in the sweat down, and then some to reach, actual hydration, and then you have to also get energy on board, right? And then take all your supplements that you're going to take for racing. We're big sodium bicarb users. We're big on nitrates and all caffeine, all that kind of stuff. So it's really hard to actually get that comfortably done within the 2 hour period.
It's intense.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, in a sense, the race starts 3 hours before the
Yeah.
race.
So you have to actually train your body to be able to cope with that, and to be able to ingest, that amount of fluid and that amount
So you would
of
practice
carbohydrate.
that.
Yeah, yeah, big time.
And what kind of caffeine would you take?
It depends. Usually, some gels.
Okay.
Yeah, some gels, maybe a tab. Some people have coffee, but I'm not a big coffee drinker, so I just like to get it straight in.
And then the number of races that you had to do to get to the final?
Yeah, 2.
2.
Yeah, which is, sometimes we have 4, but because of the way the Olympics works, there's 16 boats actually qualify for the Olympics. So we'll go through a heat to get us into the semi-final. But sometimes if you don't make it directly from the heat, you have another chance to make the semi-final, which is called a repechage.
Okay.
But we managed to avoid that one.
Because you did really well in the
Yeah, because we won the heat. So the thing about that is, though, you'll have an extra race and an extra weigh-in if you don't go to the semi straight from the heat. So it's actually a lot more important for us to make the semi-finals straight away than it might be for an open weight crew, because you're putting an extra toll on your body by sweating down again
Oh,
and
totally.
racing again.
Is it fair to say most of the winners of this division often go straight through?
Yeah, yeah. The bronze medalists from Greece actually went through the repechage,
Oh.
which was pretty unusual. Usually, yeah, it's the less races, the better.
You've been on Whoop for a while,
Mm.
and you shared your data between July 20th and August 5th, which is when you obviously competing. I mean, your data looks really good. I mean, it looks like the tapering
Yeah,
worked.
yeah,
Your resting heart rate was in the low 40s. You got a recovery score on average that's in the 70s. HRV 122, which is a high HRV. Sleep performance 95%, so you're getting a lot of sleep.
yeah.
Your sleep efficiency is very high, 90%. So that means you're getting a lot of REM sleep and slow wave sleep while you're in bed.
Mm,
And then, you were 50% green recoveries, 50% yellow, and you had no reds.
yeah.
So you must have felt pretty good about that. Now, would you look at your data throughout this period?
Yeah, yeah, in the lead up, always. Yeah, and, I have done since, I think 2019 is my first year on Whoop. So, just after my first World Championships, I kind of made the decision to, go all in for Tokyo. So I got on, and then, you guys reached out to me, I think, after the Olympics in Tokyo, because I wore the bicep strap. So yeah, I've been pretty big Whoop user since then. So looking at the data during training is really important for me. Maybe during racing, I wouldn't look at it till the evening, because at that point, you
It's
can't do
already
much about
happened.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it just gives an indication of how well I'm dealing with the training, and how sleep's going, and all that kind of stuff, and we can adjust sessions then depending on how I'm feeling, and also not just from like the recovery scores or what Whoop is saying. We work a lot with the physiologist to just go into like the raw data side of things and look at the resting heart rate trends and HRV trends, and sometimes it's actually when I'm recovering not so well in terms of Whoop, but if there's a certain trend with my HRV, that the training load is high, but I'm doing my body's working hard to recover from it.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of looking at that, and then we'll sit down kind of before the week is over to decide what we need to switch for the next week. And then after those big sessions, we have maybe 2 or 3 sort of key sessions during the week where we'll, um, we'll really push the intensity, and then all the other ones will kinda be about managing, that low intensity stuff until the next big one comes around.
Well, you actually are highlighting an important phenomenon I think that's somewhat misunderstood at times about Whoop and recovery, which is if you're in a sport where you're training to be like the pinnacle of fitness, when you're in that training phase, you actually do wanna go through periods where your body's run down.
Yeah,
Like, because in a sense, that's the indicator that you're putting as much strain on your body as you can.
yeah,
And you don't wanna overtrain to a point where your recovery won't come back even when you stop exercising. But you may wanna see some yellow and some red recoveries. Like, if you were only in the green during a training period, it'd almost be a sign that you were not putting enough strain on your body
yeah,
during your workouts.
yeah, for sure, and it's just about managing it so that you can get to a day where you need to really go hard on a green and then
Yeah,
survive the next few
right.
on a yellow.
It's like crush yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but obviously it's easy to go too far, but that's why having something like Whoop is important for me anyway, because we tread that line very, very finely, and it has gone too far in the past.
Your data demonstrates that you're a good sleeper. What are your sleep tips for us?
Like, traditionally, I'm probably not the healthiest, when it comes to, like, sleep hygiene, but I love a cold room and a dark room. I think that's really important. Like,
Yeah.
I will probably sit on my phone a bit too long before bed, but the non-negotiable is that it's dark and cold.
Have you ever worn blue light blocking glasses?
Yeah, 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 I have, sometimes I forget about them, you know, it's I need to have them right there so that I can throw them on
Well,
before.
if you use your phone before bed, I think you should wear them
Okay,
because it'll just naturally give your sleep a boost, and it'll offset looking at your phone.
yeah,
Because blue light glasses essentially block blue light produced by your phone or television set, or even some lights just have blue light in them, and blue light tells your brain to stay awake.
okay.
And so if you just wear these glasses, it's like the get out of jail free card
Mm.
for all bad screen device
Oh, sweet.
behavior.
I was gonna get can I grab a pair
Yeah,
before
yeah,
I
we'll
leave?
give them to you today. But
Sweet.
but we discovered that they were so powerful for recovery that we started designing our own,
Yeah.
and we did
Oh,
this
no
whole
way.
research study on finding the right tint to make the glasses effective. So, anyway, they do really work. So, you like cold and dark. Did you sleep in the Olympic Village?
No, we were in a hotel.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's smart. I mean, I
yeah.
get that it's like a whole experience, but when I see photos of those beds and, like, that environment, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think in Tokyo, we actually did
Okay.
sleep in the village, but it was pretty good in terms of the AC there. You know, we pretty much lived in our room between races because you could, you know, crank it down to 16 and it'd be freezing. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, 16 Celsius.
That's cold.
Yeah, it's pretty cold. I'd always try and sleep that cold. Um,
16 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit,
yeah,
which is really cold.
yeah.
Yeah.
You kinda just have to adapt to the environment as soon as you can, right? So we arrive in Tokyo, we arrived in the village, I think 5 days before our first race, so it was a pretty quick turnaround. Um, so it's just about, yeah, finding well, for us, yeah, getting into that routine of, like, finding out how the AC works or how you know, if we need to put up, um, like, bin bags or trash bags, I guess you guys
Sure.
call them,
Yeah.
on the windows
To block
to
out all
block
the
out the
light.
light and stuff. Um, so it's just getting into that as soon as you can. For Paris, we stayed in a hotel just because the course was so far out from the village, and especially for us sweating down, it just wouldn't have been feasible to travel 90 minutes to weigh in, um, and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, if I were you, I would stay in a hotel just because the beds are probably so much more comfortable.
Yeah, they were pretty comfy, and I know the cardboard beds get a lot of hate. but they're not too bad.
They're not as bad as they look.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I don't. I'd sleep on anything, so I'm not too fussy. But
I think it's crazy. I mean, it's like you all trained for 4 years, like, every day,
yeah,
thinking about this peak performance, and then you show up for the Olympics and you're sleeping on cardboard.
mm,
I mean, to me, it's just like the antithesis of optimal.
yeah. I think there's probably not as much thought put into that side of things for athletes as there maybe should be. If you want to win, you have to find workarounds for those things, the things that are in your control, I guess.
What's up, folks? If you are enjoying this podcast or if you care about health, performance, fitness, you may really enjoy getting a Whoop. That's right. You can check out Whoop at whoop.com. It measures everything around sleep, recovery, strain, and you can now sign up for free for 30 days. So you'll literally get the high performance wearable in the mail for free. You get to try it for 30 days, see whether you want to be a member. And that is just at whoop.com. Back to the guests. You've won your gold medals with Paul Donovan.
Yeah,
And Paul, how'd you get to know him?
we grew up in the same rowing club, so he would have been a couple of years older than me. So he was really good for when he was young. So he was kind of the poster boy for rowing in our club. We were always told to row like Paul and train like Paul. So um, I guess him and his brother Gary, they won a silver medal for Ireland in our event in 2016. So they were the first. They're actually the first Olympic medal for rowing in the country. We do pretty much the same training program because we have like the same coach, and down to the equipment, the facilities. We started doing a bit of training together in 2019. Um, it was my first. I think that was my final year in college. So I finished all the age group stuff, and me and my brother Jake did a European Championships that year, and we came fifth. And after that, we started kind of swapping into the double with Paul and his brother Gary, and then from that, this combination came about.
So you and your brother would compete against him and his brother.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And then at some point you sort of said like, well, maybe we should team up.
yeah. We should have a look and kind of open things up and see if we could find maybe a quicker combination, and that's how it
And
started.
how do you test something like that? Is it like F1 driver getting into a car and it's like you go around the race and the car's a little faster than before?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So there was four of us, right? So we have two doubles, and we'll have two guys race against the other two guys, and then we'll come in and swap, race again, and then swap again. So you will have rowed with each of the other guys, and then all that, you take all that data. You can do it a load of different ways. You can pick whoever went fastest, but that is sometimes not the best because it's an outdoor sport, so all the conditions are variable. Um, so basically, all those things get taken into account and compared, and the coach then decides what the best two guys for the job are, and then you go to competitions.
Now there's some aspect of like, I mean, you tell me, but there's some aspect of like learning how your partner rows, isn't there? Or
Yeah,
becoming in sync?
yeah,
So couldn't some of that be a little misleading? It's like if the two thoroughbreds haven't figured out how to row together, they might not actually look as optimal on paper.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But it's nearly a bonus if they're still going fast while not looking great, because then there's improvements that can be made.
So you'll also have some kind of video analysis,
Yeah,
or just your coach's eye will be like, okay, I could
yeah.
tell that the form wasn't perfect,
Mm.
but you still had this speed.
Yeah, and it even, would come down to biomechanics in terms of like how the boat moves when the two guys are in it, but also what you're doing in the boat. So you look at like forces on the gate, which is where the oar sits in the boat. You look at like stretcher forces, so how much force you're putting through your feet, how much is going through the gate. And yeah, it's you can look at all that stuff too.
Now, would you and Paul talk to each other before races about how each of you are feeling and this and that, or is it just sort of like, hey, I assume you're great, let's go do
Yeah,
this?
that's pretty much it. Like, it's pretty chill. I
Yeah.
think it can get overcomplicated sometimes, and Um, we might take it too far in terms of like we don't usually have a plan. We kind of just react to what's going on in the race. But I think because we do so much training together and we've raced together so many times before, um, we usually will come to the same conclusion within races, without having to say anything. And I can feel what he's doing and he can feel what I'm doing. So if there actually doesn't need to be that much communication between us. Whereas it's different for, it's different for different crews, but I think for us, yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
What would be something in the race that you would be reacting to?
It would be maybe conditions. So if there's some wind that we weren't expecting, or if a competitor does something completely different.
Like they come out faster or
Yeah,
something?
yeah. So usually, because you can't affect what anyone else is doing, we're quite internal, and the best way to go fast and wrong is just focus on yourself and try and get from the start to finish as quick as you can. But there are some tactics, I guess, for us. We try and do a lot of work in the middle and the end of the race and not start too hard, just so we're coming into the line at like top speed. But some of our competitors sometimes will go off quite hard, and because in rowing you can see who you're beating. Like you can't if you get ahead, then you can see everyone ahead of you and sort of watch them make moves and try and stay on top of them. So I think psychologically that's something that a lot of our big rivals go for. So like the Swiss and the Italians usually have a pretty good start, and they're our sort of biggest rivals. The Greeks as well had a really good start in the Olympics. And we're usually known for being a bit slower out of the block. That would be something that we wouldn't take too much notice of, but just be aware of. You don't want someone going ahead and then all of a sudden they're 2 or 3 lengths off, and you don't know what's
It's an
happened.
interesting point about if you're in first, you can see where everyone is behind you. I mean, it's the only I'm trying to think of another sport where your back is to the finish line.
Yeah,
I mean, it's sort of a funny
yeah,
concept
it
in and out
is.
of itself. So it's why it's interesting thinking about how you position yourself throughout a race or how you know when to push harder. Now, will you ever speak during the race?
Yeah, sometimes, but it's just words,
Like
you can't really.
go or
Yeah,
now or
yeah.
something like
Usually mine is
provocative.
good.
Good?
Yeah, I'm just like, "We're good." We don't really need to
You can just feel the
communicate.
pace.
Yeah, but I just like to let Paul know that I'm there with him and he can go and I'll be there. And if I don't say good, then he might know to just keep it steady to till the finish. But yeah, I like saying stuff like that. I don't know if you'd call it adrenaline, but from saying stuff like that, you get sort of an emotional reaction. Even like if I say even to myself like we're good, this is good, it kind of triggers something in my brain anyway, and it'll it'll sort of help. And it's a bit of a distraction for 10 strokes anyway, so I don't have to count those ones.
You don't have to count those
Yeah,
10.
yeah.
Now, I think this is an obvious question, but if you're pushing at a slightly different intensity than Paul, will that
Mhm.
affect the boat? Like, would it affect the form?
If it was like drastically different, then
Okay.
then yeah. But I think if we're in maybe 20 or 30 watts of each other, it won't be it won't be too bad. Just the main thing is to move together.
Move together.
Yeah, and usually that won't be affected too much because we're both going as hard as we can in a race. So there's not too much difference. The issue there comes when one of us might have gone a bit too hard at a certain point in the race and not have enough gas at the end of the race to finish, and that's when the discrepancies in power comes and you can start falling apart. And sometimes you see crews totally just lose it in the last 10 because they've spent all their energy or someone has. So it's can be tough to manage, but I think because we're so well drilled at this point, and yeah, we know ourselves so well, I don't think that's happened to us in a
At
long time.
at the end of, one of the interim races or, like, the semifinal,
Yeah.
would you and Paul, like, post game it and be like, "Oh, I felt good at this point," or "Not so good at this point,"
Yeah.
or is it, again, just sort of it happened?
Yeah. Yeah, no, a lot of the time, I remember after a semi-final, we were both pretty excited about going into the final because it
You
felt
felt good.
really good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
good.
And feeling it's when you're at the top of your like physical peak and your condition, you really feel it, and you can feel a difference from other races. And we got through that semi final, and we kind of both said to each other how excited we were to get going because we didn't need to dig into our energy reserves to win, and we won that semi final by quite a lot against the Swiss guys who had actually beat us a couple of weeks before. Well, not a couple of weeks. I think it was maybe 6 weeks before. So I think that was just like we were just proud in our training block, and the fact that we got it right and we were able to turn that around. So when we do kind of dissect it and post game like that, it's usually to do with what we did coming into it and whether we need to include that again or leave it out. And then during the race, yeah, it kind of just happens, I think.
Did you almost follow the same exact routine for the final race as you did for the semifinal, given how good you felt?
Yeah, but we actually would have dropped maybe one session. So because the race is a week long, or the regatta is a week long,
Yeah.
we try hit the earlier rounds a small bit fatigued, so that when we start
So
resting,
you're peaking.
yeah, we can
Yeah.
peak for the final. So we're still doing some pretty unusual sessions in terms of like intensity in between our racing, which I think might be something that I don't know if other teams do that.
What would be an example of an unusual session?
I don't want to give away all our secrets here,
Sure. Yeah.
but
There you go.
we're hitting quite high intensities
Okay.
in between races.
Yeah.
So we'll go into zone 3 or 4 session
Wow.
in between races sometimes. Not a full one. You won't be getting into like the 60 minutes of work, but yeah, substantial amount given that like it's a race week.
And a workout like that will have some lactic acid buildup in your
Yeah,
body.
yeah.
How do you find the most effective way to flush that?
Um, I think it's just cooling down properly, right? Like you have to spend the time um checking for one, because I think a lot of people will do the sessions and you think, oh, that was really good, that was great, but you're trying to train your body to deal with lactate and to clear it. So part of that learning how to clear it is doing those cool downs and measuring. Because there's no point doing it and then being cooked for the race the next day. So you do need to just learn how to fuel during and after so that you recover and benefit from those sessions. I
And
don't I don't think you can get around clearing lactate without doing that sort of whatever it is, 10 or 15 minutes of low intensity. Like there's no other way I found of clearing it. Like you can't sit in an ice bath or sit in recovery boots. Like
so
it'll still
you
be there.
yeah, you find you have to do like the cool down
Yeah.
workout
Yeah.
or exercise.
Mm.
And will you do a cold plunge or anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah. We usually it would be after uh, a sweat down before the race so that you're not going into the race with your core temp, so elevated.
And this is the day before?
This is the morning of.
Morning of, you'll
Yeah.
do a cold plunge.
Yeah, yeah, 2 hours. Well, it'd be more than 2 hours before because we weigh in 2 hours before, but yeah, pretty early on the day of the race.
That's interesting.
Mm.
Is that common amongst the sport, or that's something you do?
I don't know. I think cold plunging is common, but the timing of it will be different. I think a lot of people go after as well to bring the temperature down.
Now, will you do cold plunging after training sessions or not?
Not usually. Maybe more heat stuff,
Yeah.
um, after training.
It's interesting, like, a lot of the research is showing that inflammation actually has a benefit
Yeah,
to gains,
yeah.
and so if you're taking a cold plunge, you're actually, obviously suppressing that inflammation,
Mm.
and there's some evidence as well that, taking a cold plunge before exercise or before weightlifting in particular can boost the effect
Oh,
of that
really?
weightlifting. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Or
There you go.
and so maybe you've already been a step out ahead of this if without
Yeah,
realizing it.
yeah, but it is an interesting piece. Sometimes you do want that. Obviously, during racing, you want less inflammation, but you actually need the inflammation to get better and make the gains from training. So, yeah, during training, I try and avoid that stuff.
You try to
Just
avoid cold plunge, but you'll stay warm.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Which, just to say, is not necessarily conventional wisdom in a variety of sports. Like, a lot of sports will encourage you to do cold
Mm,
plunging after
mm,
hard training.
yeah.
So, anyway, the scientific research is still out. What's the feeling of winning a gold medal?
A lot of relief, to be honest. Yeah, I
Relief.
think a good thing crossing the line is the best part. It's not the perfect race, but a pretty good race. You have to have a pretty good race to win an Olympics, and the feeling of doing that and being the best in your sport, it's obviously really rewarding. Like I don't know how else to describe it, like emotionally and physically. It's I hope everyone has something in their lives that you can feel that way from, because it is really cool. And then the rest of it is kind of it's just nice to see your family and see the national anthem, and you feel proud. But definitely crossing the line is the best part, I think.
If I'm not mistaken, the lightweight division is not gonna be in 2028
Yeah,
in
yeah,
LA,
it's
right?
gone. Yeah, I think it's been removed from the Olympic program, like, indefinitely now. Yeah,
Does that
so
kinda piss you off? I mean,
um
or you're over it?
yeah, I'm over it now. Like I've got 2 in the lightweight category, so
Yeah.
I think that's plenty. But I think the idea behind it was to make the sport a bit more inclusive, because traditionally there's been a lot of, tall guys who get sort of, I guess, talent ID'd, and they generally are better at rowing because, longer levers
Yeah.
and all that stuff. But now I think maybe one of the reasons that the event got cut is because we are getting pretty close to the heavyweight guys. And when you talk even to other countries, you talk about we train against our heavyweight double a lot, and all other countries will. And the differences aren't huge, and we do beat our guys sometimes.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of opportunity to explore what actually works for those people who don't have as the height advantage. And
Which you don't have, just to say
yeah,
it.
yeah. Just disclaimer.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not tall.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is a cool opportunity to kind of try and find ways around that, whether it's like fitness or strength or setting up the boat in a different way. Um, yeah, excited to try and find some hacks.
So what do you think you're gonna do for 2028?
Um, I really like the double as an event. Like it's pretty personal. There's 2 people, and it's a lot easier to manage than bigger boats. But it does depend on what the coaches want to do. So you kind of just have to show up and go your fastest, and then hopefully that will put you in a good position to win Olympic medal. Yeah.
So you kinda hand the keys over to the coaches in a
Yeah,
sense.
in a
Wow.
sense, yeah, and they'll try different combinations and different boats. They just go with what, is probably gonna have the best chance at an Olympic medal, so
Well, this has been fascinating, Fintan, and I'm stoked for you, that you've got 2 gold medals now. What should we know about these medals that we're looking at on the desk?
oh, I think they probably passed through, like, thousands of grubby
I see
hands at the
this one's
moment.
got a few dings on it. Can I take a look at
Yeah,
this?
yeah, have a look. I think they're both probably pretty banged up at this point, but,
I will say I don't feel worthy holding this. It's like it feels like it should just be in your possession at all times.
oh, no, I think it's
But
nice,
one thing that you realize they're really heavy.
yeah, yeah, I think they
I mean, this is heavy, like, I feel some weight to it.
I think they're both am I right in saying a pound? Is that, like, 600 grams maybe?
That sounds like what
Quick math?
this actually feels like it weighs more than a pound.
Yeah, maybe.
1.3 pounds,
There you
okay,
go.
yeah. Glad to know I'm calibrated on my
Yeah, yeah.
biceps. Terrific.
Yeah, I think it's nice to share them around though. Like it's pretty cool seeing especially like young kids holding them, but
It's on
it's cool
the
they've got like the event yeah, it's got
written
like
on the bottom.
yeah,
Yeah, I saw that.
engraved so no one can steal it. And then this one's nice too. It's got a piece of the Eiffel Tower in
Oh,
from
that's pretty
Paris.
cool,
Yeah, so
right?
that's some iron from the original Eiffel Tower, I think.
And I noticed that they did the Eiffel Tower in the background
Yeah, on the Paris one.
on the
Yeah, which
Paris
is
one,
different,
but
I think.
not
I'm
the
not sure if
Tokyo
they've
one.
done that before. So yeah, nice. That's nice personal touch.
Any favorite athletes that you met at the Olympics?
Didn't meet many, um, but I love endurance events. So the Ingebrigtsens are heroes of ours, and a lot of rowers too. I know they mightn't be as famous in terms of like the Olympics, but for us, um, there are some guys that have won even more Olympic medals than us, and it's really cool to just like see them constantly
Just
doing what they
grinding.
do. Yeah, these guys from Croatia, the Sinkovic brothers, they've won. I think they won. Have they won like four now? Four medals. So yeah, they're
4
we're
medals, yeah.
really good pals with them. So it's pretty cool to see people like that just consistently delivering, and like it's cool to learn from them as well. So
Well, it's been great learning from you, Fintan. We're stoked to have you
thanks for having me.
on
Yeah.
Whoop, and wishing you nothing but continued success, man.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Big thank you to Fintan for joining me on the Whoop podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Whoop podcast. You can check us out on social at Whoop, at Will Ahmed. If you have a question you want to see answered on the podcast, email us podcast@whoop.com. And that's a wrap, folks. We'll be here next week on the Whoop podcast. Stay healthy, stay in the green.